Okay, we'll go ahead and start the recording here. And what I made this afternoon is a short list of what I'm going to cover in this topic, in this lecture on React. And really what we're going to be doing is getting some seed data into our programs. And what I mean by seed data is just, the initial data that your program starts with. And so you could call it dummy data, but oftentimes you just call it seed data. So we're going to put some seed data into a React hook, and then we're going to display that using what's called the map function. And so we're going to basically seed the data, and then we're going to display that data. And in that data, we're going to discuss things like how to get unique identifiers and how to work with images in our data and get images to display in our React pages. And so this is kind of a high level. I wanted to go ahead and make a new folder. And what I'm going to do is ultimately I'm going to be doing CRUD operations on students, and so like ranking students as an example. And so I'll just make this folder, put it up in the upper left so that's there for me to reference, and then we'll get this started. I will be referencing this folder in the future, so this kind of is a lecture that's going to start, and I will be building on this. And so as we've done many times, we'll create React app, and while that's running, kind of go back to my to-do list. Let's see, with part of this, I want to talk about Makaru. It's also nano ID, kind of belongs up here. Seed data belongs in there, and really so do images. So a couple of subtopics under seed data. Let this do its thing. And like I've done several times, after this we'll install bootstrap, and I'll take a quick second to kind of show you what version it installs. In the future I won't have to keep doing this. This will just be the one-time thing. Okay, success. CRUD students is created. And let's go ahead and install bootstrap. That's pretty quick. And then the other package that I'm going to install that's new this time is something called nano ID. So install nano ID. And so our students will all have a unique identifier. So like student ID of 1 is clearly not unique. You want something that's referred to as a globally unique identifier, or GUID, G-U-I-D. So we're going to use nano ID for that purpose. And so if we kind of dig down into here into app.js real quick, we'll throw in a return statement. Now one of the rules here, and you would find this out pretty quickly, is that your your return statement has to have a root element, and so I'm going to go ahead and make my container and an h1 hello world and save that, and then we'll boot this up and make sure that bootstrap is in fact working. Open up the console. And forgot a step real quick, go back to the import statement. Don't forget to import bootstrap, dist, CSS, bootstrap.min.css. In order to get Bootstrap, you need to install it and import it. And now let's bring that back up. Okay, now we got Bootstrap kicking, and I could tell because we've got the container. And if I kind of dig through here, as I was doing earlier, you notice in the head, kind of scroll here, we've got these style tags. Turns out this third style, no, second style? First style. There it is. It was this style tag. Which one was it? It was the third one. So here's the third one, and there you can see the comment, Bootstrap v5.2. So that's where you know the version of Bootstrap, kind of digging through the style. These are embedded style tags in the HTML. And so project up and running. Now to my task list is I need to populate a React hook with an array of seed data. And so I'm going to start with a sample set of just 10 students. And I want to show Makaru, which will help me generate dummy data. And so you might have used this in a previous class of mine. But let's just say first name, last name, email, and those are fine fields to have. And I'm just going to kind of keep it at that. Now I'm going to add 2 more fields to my students, but this will help me at least generate 10 students, and you change the format, it's CSV to JSON, JavaScript object notation, and let's make sure that it is in an array. And here, if you preview the data, you can see we have an array of JavaScript objects. Those objects have a first name, last name, and email. So this is basically the data that I want. I'm just going to start by copying this. So Makaru's done its job and given me some dummy data. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this into a into a variable called students equals, and I'll paste it in and put my semicolon here. And so I did this above the return statement, and interesting that all my properties are going in quotes. I'm gonna not want that, so I'm gonna say first name see if I can control. There we go. Holding down control and clicking where I want. Now holding shift pasting. Copying, holding down. I said Control, but I meant Alt because I was holding down Alt. Power just flickered? Hopefully. Amelia, you still with me?
Yes, but I did see the flicker you're talking about. Weird.
Hopefully that didn't screw this recording up. I wonder if there's a setting in Makaru that I did there that did that. Now, also what I want for each student, so I got my array of JavaScript objects, and what I want to do is make sure that each student has a unique identifier associated with them. So in order to do that, we needed to install NanoID, which I did the npm package. We're going to import that by saying import NanoID from NanoID. What that allows us to do is have an ID property, and you simply call the NanoID function. And this will generate a unique identifier for each student. And so I'll be able to display that when I get to the display portion. I think it's like 34 characters and completely random, and there we go. I'll come back to the images. Actually, no, let's do images now. So each student will have an image property, and here we'll say images slash, and I just went ahead and called it student 1, student 2, student 3, and so forth. So I'll just put that in. Student 7, student 8, 9, and I believe I got one for student 10. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those images into the right directory. So let me, yeah, there is 10 students. So where do I need to copy these into? Turns out I need to copy these images into the public folder. And so here on my computer, I'll go into the public folder. I'll make a new folder called images. And I used a site, These People Do Not Exist, and it just looks like real people, but they're not real people. And there are my 10 students. There's my images of my 10 students as JPEGs. That again, we are going to get to display. Okay. So now we've got an array of students. Let's go ahead and make a hook to store this data in. In order to make it's a use state hook, import from React use state. I need a comma from React, and that will allow us to do this const. My variable will be called all students, and the function to to put data into all students will be called set all students. And then equals use state. We'll pass it null, so it's empty to begin with, or null to begin with, right? To be technical. So here's our hook. What we need to do is call this method and pass it this array of objects to then populate this variable called all students. The way that will be done, there's a little nifty trick here that says something like this. This is a shorthand, kind of an if-else statement, but this is a shorthand that you'll see with JavaScript starting with that ES6. Basically say if all students, if not all students, we'll keep it, what is all students? All students is our variable here. And so what this says is, hey, basically, if there's no data in that variable, then we're going to show a button, an HTML button, type of button, class name. Again, keep in mind, because this is React, you use the class name attribute, not the class attribute. It'll work with just if it was just class, but React will bark at you and give you an error in the console. Okay, so we got some bootstrap classes, and we'll just call this save students. So basically what this says is, hey, if there's no data in our variable called all students, then show the button. And this button only displays when there's no data saved in that hook variable. Now what we need to do is say, well, if you on click, we need to actually save our students. So on click, we're going to have our arrow function to call set all students. So our function is called set all students, and pass it the array. Because keep in mind, the array is what we're putting into there, which is called students. Okay, so this is kind of a neat trick that basically says, hey, if there's no data in that variable, then display the button. And then once there is data in that variable, the button should go away. So let's close Rockaroo. So when you load the page, it says save students, and you click it, it goes away. Suffice to say, that's just showing that it works at this point, that the data is going into the variable. And this is what we would want. And so for now, we're just going to keep this button kind of down here to populate the data into the hook. Then from there, we're going to be able to display the data. So let's talk about that. So kind of did these first pieces pretty quick. We did have an array of seed data. We put that seed data into a React hook variable. We used Makaru, we used NanoID. Kind of showed how and where to put images. So now what we need to do is actually display this on the screen, display this data on the screen. We got an ID, a first name, a last name, an email, and a bunch of images. What you might use for this would be some sort of card. Trying to think of like the appropriate component in Bootstrap, and I think a card would be good, because cards have titles and some, let's see what we would want. what kind of card we would want. The kitchen sink. We probably don't need the kitchen sink. Header and a footer, something with an image, obviously. Text alignment, navigation. Okay. So probably one of these earlier cards that has an image in it. So here's my image. And this kind of works because it's just a list. And I like that. And then here's my card body. So the list can just have maybe the title, you put the first and last name, and then, I don't know, so something like this will be the HTML that we use for each student that we're going to display. And so I'm just going to kind of keep that as my reference. I don't think I'm going to copy and paste. Instead, I'll code what I need out of that. So above my container, what I'll do is I'll just make a bootstrap grid, and then in my grid I'll have a bunch of cards. And so let's go ahead and get my bootstrap div class of row and class name, div class name of call hyphen, if we want a row of, I don't know, 6, it'll be 2. Call 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, on a large monitor, we want that to be 6. Anything smaller, we can grow down. So, kind of go back to the bootstrap grid. I believe it's call large, but let me double check that. I'll come back to my card code. Let me go to my grid system, which is right here, and mainly we got large and up, so call hyphen LG. So I'm just going to add in LG on each one of these. LG hyphen 2. Alt, 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 alt. LG hyphen. Okay, so now booting this up. npm start. Do I already have it running? Okay, so there's my columns. If I shrink it down, it goes to single column. So that's cool, and we're going to put cards in each one of these columns. And the cards will display the student data. So that's cool. So let's go back to the card documentation. And my bootstrap cards. And again, I want something with an image and a list in it. So I'm going to start in my first column. And div class name card. And then here's my image. I'll come back to my image. I need to fill that in, that's why that's erroring out. Underneath my image, I'll have my card body. And within maybe I'm going to try combining this. So instead of my card body, I got my class of card. There's my image. I'm just going to have my list group here. UL class name is list group. And then they have a list group flush. Okay, and for now, I'll just put a image that's not going to work with an alt of broken me, broken image, and redundant alt attribute. I'm broken. I'll just say broken. Okay, doesn't want me to use the word broken image. It's broken. Okay. Okay. I need to turn off the bullets. And maybe we do that by saying list group item. So on my class name equals list group item. And that does that trick. Okay, good. Now just to get the images to work, just to hard code this, and this is not what we'll do ultimately, we'll say images / student1.jpg. Okay. So now we have our images coming up, and you can see how that's going to work. And so besides the image, there are how many pieces of data? There are 4. So I need each one of this. I need 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is just the gist of what I'm looking for. We got a bunch of cards, and then the card there's a list, and that's good. Now the trick, not the trick, but the method that's going to be really useful to us is we have a bunch of data stored in this all students variable, and ultimately that is an array. So all students is an array. There is a function called the map function that's commonly used that basically says for each item in the array, put this HTML. And so I'm going to, now that I have this as my template, I'm going to do this a little bit differently, right? Because Chrome is giving me notifications about things I don't care about right now. Basically, for every item, I want to add, a new div here. So I really don't need 6 divs. I just want to say, okay, for every student in my array, add one of these cards inside of a call. And so this is where we're going to use these curlies. Again, keep in mind when you see these curlies, you can write JavaScript and HTML in there. And it's the opposite of this. This is, okay, if all students does not have data, display the button. Okay, so the opposite of that is if there are students, you say all students, and so only if they're students are we going to display what I'm coding here. So only if all students has data are we going to map all students. All students dot map. And the map function looks like this. It says for each student, now this is our variable that we get to name, do this. Now what is this? So again, there's the end of our map function, and you put parentheses here, and this is going to be where we have a call. We're basically going to put this, because for each student we're going to do this. Now I'm just going to cut and paste right here and get it to work. Now we're not using the actual student data yet, but this is saying for each student put a call, and there's 10 students, so there should be 10 calls. Each call should have a card in it. This is hard coded to show student 1, and then it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I save students, we got 10 of these working, and obviously this is not the end result, but it's what I want at this point. This is what I've coded. So again, we've looked at this. This says, hey, when the student data is saved, this all students data is saved, let's map each student. We do a little arrow function here, and then inside these parentheses, we can write HTML. Now, instead of hard coding the student image here, we could put a variable, which will be student.image. Well, keep in mind, each student, well, the first student has an image property of student 1. The next student has an image property of student 2, student 3. So by changing the, this attribute value to be hard coded, now it's a little bit more dynamic. And when we pull this up, we save students. There you can see it's pulling all of our student information. We could do the same thing here. Instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, we say student dot, I believe it's the ID property, student dot first name, student dot last name. And one thing I realize is that the names aren't going to match the images, but that's not the point. Student dot, what else am I forgetting? Email. And so we're displaying the images of the students. It's no longer broken. So I'll say, boy, it doesn't. I was going to try and fake it out by using the word picture instead of image. Happy students. Now let's take a look at the console, because I think there's there we go. There's each student name, first name, last name, and email. And so we have completed said tasks on how to use the array.map function to display the seed data. And I did say let's look at the console, because I don't think each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So this is a React error that I will show you how to fix in a future video. But basically it wants a unique key right here, and I believe you could just do this, because each student ID is unique. But again, I'll make sure. I'll double check myself there before I commit to that. All right, so that was a quick demo on how to seed your apps with some dummy data and get that dummy data to display on your page.